don't mind my computer. It's going to sit over here, and it's going to help solve cancer, which we'll get to. So I just ticked off a handful of industries that seem incredibly different, that you think would have nothing in common. But what strikes me about your work is the common thread is creativity running through all of these. So I'm curious to hear, we're often curious to hear about where you get your ideas, where the best ideas come from. So Robin, actually I'd like to start with you, since I just introduced my computer over here doing its handiwork, and explain how, first off, what the World Community Grid is and where the idea came from.
Great. Well, World Community Grid, and that's worldcommunitygrid.org, so everybody go to that website and join, is this wonderful project at IBM that synthesizes volunteerism, all of our innate urge to make a difference in the world, with cutting-edge technology and some of the best researchers all around the world. And what we've done is taken some grid technology, and now we've added cloud technology that you hear about all the time and that IBM uses for all of our customers, our business customers, and we're using it to connect everybody's laptops. We have room for every single laptop, every single device in the world. And when we bring them all together, we can develop a virtual supercomputer. And then we take that computational power and we provide it to researchers doing important things like looking for new AIDS drugs, looking for better ways to diagnose cancer, looking for the next more efficient chemical to use to make solar cells, or finding a better strain of rice. Researchers who are doing that kind of work, and they don't have access to a virtual supercomputer. They don't have any of the supercomputing they need, and therefore all of this important research is really just struggling along, and we're not making the progress. But when we get everyone together and we get hold of your laptops and all of the power on those laptops, pull it together, we can really make a difference for mankind and womankind and personkind, and that's what we're trying to do.
So was this a researcher who was coming up with the idea and realizing, I don't have access to a supercomputer, and that's what I really need to do to crunch the numbers to figure out the best candidates for, for AIDS or for cancer? Or was it from within a group within IBM?
Well, we have a group at IBM that I'm fortunate enough to be a member of, this organization on citizenship. And what we do is it's like being in this wonderful candy store. We look at all of the great innovations at IBM. We go to IBM Research and we talk to the researchers. We deal with our folks in business. And we say, what do you have? And how do I take it 10 degrees one way, or stand it on its head, or turn it 30 degrees the other way, and say, how could this really help in the communities where we live and work? And whether that's voice recognition technology that can help children learn how to read, or whether that's grid and cloud technology that can help us find the next treatment for AIDS, that's what we do. We pull those things together, and it's a wonderful brainstorming opportunity.
Mm-hmm. Jeff, I'm going to transition over to a previous job that you had, banking. And I'm curious how this program that you told me about with basically offering banks in subway stations, where that idea came about, because I imagine people don't necessarily ask for that, and how you anticipate that that's actually something that's going to work.
Sure, and I think it goes back to where you look for inspirations, and the simple answer there is customers. I will say that especially today and over the last few weeks in the taking of Wall Street, I'm delighted to no longer be working for a bank. Because maybe some of you would storm the stage. There are a lot of good bankers in the world, and I won't try to make the case for that. But I think those that are actually really tried to go back to what banking was all about in the first place, which is to help you manage your money and make good decisions and help you use it wisely and help it grow. And I think what happened over the years is we just sort of lost the plot. And one of the big areas of banking, of course, is retail banking, consumer banking, where many of us leave and use our money. And I think we just made it very difficult over the years for people to do that. We created these oxymoron retail banks that had nothing about a retail experience to them. We had them in inconvenient locations. When you went there, you had to stand in queues and have desks and tellers. And we just started looking about how people were living their lives, and a lot of our growth was in Asia. So we looked particularly there and saw how people were living in cities, and saw how so many people were using public transportation. And we thought, well, what if we actually went to where customers were twice a day amongst their busy days, and what if we created little spaces inside subway stations and actually made it very easy for them, and actually made it self-service, and actually combined the transit card with a debit card or a credit card so that you could use the same card to pay, that it always gets topped up. So simple answer there was, I think, just kind of looking at how people are living their lives and think about how we could actually catch up and serve them in a different way.
And Paul, in terms of coming up with an idea for a restaurant like the Publican, it seems like, I'll let you explain it, but it seems like part of your field research is like going to Europe and actually eating and looking around and being inspired and trying to figure out how can I take what works over there for you and then bring it back here.
Yeah, this is my field research with a nice cold beer. You know, for me and for my business partners, I think first and foremost, we sort of strive to break the mold, to do things differently. We take a lot of pride in it, and I think we look for a simple, in the case of the Publican, the simple soundbite was oysters, pork, and beer. And instead of like saying, what can we do, what's going to be a successful concept, we glom onto something that we're passionate about. So the inspiration comes from oysters, pork, and beer. It's that simple. And then we look for some cultural relevance somewhere that will make it stand up. And with that one, we happen to find a lot of cultural relevance in Belgium. So we don't, you know, we're not typical businessmen where we think this is going to kill it, we're going to come up with this idea, people are going to love it. We say, you know, if we build it, they will come, basically. You know, it's all every concept we've done has been driven by passion, by a simple soundbite like that. Like in the case of Avec, it was a trip to Europe with my wife, visiting a whole group of friends of hers that I'd never met before. She actually got in this horrific motorcycle accident in France many years ago and convalesced in the Swiss Alps, and I had never been there. We got together, she took me out there, and we were greeted at the airport and taken to this house in the mountains, and we sat around a wood hearth and drank wine, and friends came and more friends came, and we cooked, and it became this incredible sharing experience. And I thought, man, no restaurants are really focused on sharing. They're all about, you know, you get your table, you get your food, and you're done. And Avec is, you know, sharing the experience with loved ones, sharing wine, breaking bread, and it becomes more because you sit at tables with people you don't know, and you know, the stigma was communal dining doesn't work, and we said, well, it will work because we're going to find some real relevance in the idea.
Well, I think what's interesting is that it actually, it came from both food but also experience.
Yeah.
And so much of it was, I need to recreate that experience. We'll figure out the food that will work, but we want to bring people together in a different way than they've gathered before.
Yes and no. I think, you know, me being the chef, I think the crux of the concept comes from purely from food. That's where it starts, and how food makes me feel. Right. And then I sort of look around and figure out, or we figure out what will make that food work, what environment will be perfect in.
Alison, you guys actually at Levy have a place that is designed to come up with new ideas. The Innovation Kitchen, which I've been to a few years ago, when I wrote about you guys, tell me a little bit about the brainstorming process there. You know, how you guys are literally getting started on new concepts for some of these sporting events and some of the corporate campuses that you guys cater.
Yeah, so we're really fortunate to have this great kitchen, and a little bit of the concept, Paul, you talked about sharing, and people really, food is such an emotional business, and you can get everybody kind of excited about food, whether it was the food they ate as a kid, or it's the food that, you know, they remember doing an event around. So for us, the test kitchen was about finding a place where people could share. It was a place where we could share small ideas, and people could sit around a counter with, you know, a refrigerator and a stove and a chef kind of going at something in the background and feel very kind of welcome to bring something forward. So it was finding the right environment where ideas could literally grow. And a kitchen was a really great place for that. It's also a really great place to bring in partners. We're really fortunate to be in partnership with some great sports organizations. And while they might be about the players or the game or the scores, unless you're the Bears, you absolutely want to make people feel like this is their idea. So we built the kitchen intentionally where everyone could sit around and see each other's faces and see how each other reacted to the food they were tasting or the idea that they were talking about. So for us, it really came from something we knew well, which was kitchens. I mean, we were restaurateurs to start with. So we took what we knew and we took what we did really well, which was ideate in a kitchen. And we used that as our inspiration and place for other ideas to kind of percolate from there. So that's been great for us. And then we actually have a studio space where we do, business problem solving and different things. But it really comes from our love of being in a kitchen and letting people, contribute in a way that makes them feel great.
I'm curious, one thing you touched on there is getting people involved. And you're reminding me, people don't innovate or come up with these ideas in a vacuum. Especially, I'm thinking we have a couple people here, 3 people here from big companies. And, I'm curious about this idea of innovating with the reality of the fact that there are other stakeholders involved. Jeff, talk a little bit about that buy-in. Essentially, I think at one point you said, look, it's easy to come up with great ideas. The hard part is executing, is getting the buy-in within a large company.
Yeah, it is. And for those of you that work in big corporations, courage, there is a way through it, and I think it's slower. And a number of us have had the experience of a startup, and the beautiful thing about a startup is, well, bad thing is you're not sure if it's going to work, and you may not make a lot of money, and it's really risky, and you worry a lot. But you don't have this sort of friction, and you don't have all these people giving so many opinions and so much of an existing business to run. So I think the key is to involve people along the way around some clear focus areas. I think that's the other thing that we've learned, and maybe some of you have learned, is don't start all over the place. Pick some spots where there's a real growth opportunity, where you have some really strong customer insights, and then as you're forming the concept for what this new business is, to involve people along the way and to help them feel a part of it. Because the worst thing, and I've made this mistake, and maybe some others have too, is if you fully bake a concept and then take it back to the business, they'll just tear it to shreds. Why didn't you do this? Why are you doing it that way? So it's a little slower, but I think if you bring people along and keep them focused on this is why we're doing it, and you can be a part of it. And I think also start creating this sense of accountability that you're going to be responsible for taking it to market at some point. So start thinking ahead about how you're going to do that. Those are some of the ways we've done it.
The other thing I'm thinking of is you're new in the job. You just started, and this is the first time Hyatt has had an innovation officer. So talk a little bit about that approach of introducing this idea to the organization. I mean, in some sense, you are the outsider all of a sudden coming in, and it could be it could involve stepping on some toes when you come in with these new ideas or new approach.
Yeah, I mean, maybe what qualified me for this was for the last 20, 25 years, I've spent maybe more than half of my life in hotel rooms. So
good research.
You've done the research. You're there, right?
I had a long list of complaints, which is a lot of where the insights and the ideas come from. If we didn't have to do it this way, wouldn't that be great? So I think that was part of it. And the hotel industry, I think for many, many years was a leader in hospitality, was a leader in experience. We talk a lot about experience design these days. I think maybe had a history in great restaurant concepts and food. A lot of us maybe figured out what forks to use when at a great hotel restaurant. And somewhere along the way, I think we just got same old, same old. And it turns out we didn't want to leave our homes because we had better bathrooms at home, and we had better kitchens at home, and people were nicer to us at home. So I think that's part of what our industry is waking up to. Maybe not so much at the higher end, the luxury, but kind of in this mass mainstream. We're at Hyatt these days calling it the sea of sameness. And how do you just break out of this? And so I think for us at Hyatt, at least, there was a realization that we're a great company with great colleagues concerned and really dedicated to authentic hospitality, but maybe it's a little outdated. and it's time that we restore sort of a leadership in hospitality.
Mm-hmm. Robin, at IBM, this idea of this corporate service corps sounds amazing. But then I think if I'm one of the bosses at IBM and I hear about losing my best performers for 4 months, I'm going to freak out. So I'm curious how you sell that idea, how you get the buy-in, from the right people that are really going to make it happen.
Yeah. I think that's a great question. And I'd go back to something Jeff said, that large organizations and mature organizations, they get habits and they get structures and they get processes, and those things, they serve us well in many situations, but they only really serve us well if we're willing to change. And I think IBM is having its centennial this year, so we've been rummaging around in the attic and thinking about these things, and it's clear that the only way you can have success is if you get up every day and you say, what's next? Mm-hmm. We are constantly saying, okay, this is terrific, but what's next, and where do we go from here? And corporate service corps is one of those ideas that is about what's next. IBM leadership came to us and said, we need to learn about developing countries. We need to grow IBM in Africa. We want to go to ASEAN. We want to go to all these places where IBM isn't 100 years old, where no one knows what IBM is. How are we going to do that? And we said, well, we're going to send IBMers there. And we're going to introduce IBM by having them meet our best IBMers. But not just for a day, and not on a business trip, and actually not at a Western hotel, but in that environment. And so we have these groups of IBMers. They're from all over the world. They get together, they prepare in a virtual team, and then they go somewhere that none of them have ever been, and a second-tier city, they stay at the kind of a hotel where a local professional would stay, and they work with a local client, and they're really doing high-quality IT and business consulting to help make that place run better. So we're introducing our brand. They're learning, they said, they're learning who IBM is in the best possible way with our most wonderful IBMers. We're learning about this market. We're learning everything about it. We're soaking it up. And we have a group of IBMers now who had this life-changing experience. And they actually say that. You read through the evaluations, and they all say, it was life-changing. It was amazing what happened to us. They're going to stay at IBM. And they tell us they're going to stay. And some of you might actually want to come and work at IBM. If I told you, if you become a high performer, you could go on one of these
So you're good at getting buy-in.
We're going to get buy-in.
We just saw that happen.
Yeah, so that's what we tell our managers. We say, do you want a motivated employee who's got an incredible experience, who now loves IBM and wants to devote everything they have to making IBM a success all over the world?
Right.
You'd let them go for a couple of weeks.
Sure.
A couple months.
All right, Paul, at the other end of the spectrum, so we just talked about big companies and how you make that work. So the notion is, oh, well, then if you're in charge of your own shop at a smaller operation, then, hey, innovation's going to be easy. Boy, you don't have to deal with the higher-ups or anything. What is the hard part, on your end, when you do have more control, but there are going to be other obstacles?
There's really no hard part. You just do it. I think for me, I'm fortunate to have a great partnership. And we each run a different part of the business. For me, I just dive in. The reason I was a little bit late today is because we were going over a budget that I had far exceeded, as chefs will. So I think for me, the hard part is...
That sounds like a hard part right there. Yeah,
the hard part is taming the enthusiasm and taming the creativity to fit within the structure of what's going to make our business work. We're fortunate. We have 5 places that we've opened. They're all very successful. Financially, concept-wise, the whole 9 yards, and just plugging it into that box is really difficult. I think on a much smaller scale, I have to establish the buy-in too from my business partners, in order for us to put our money together and finance the deal. So they pretty much they believe what I say when I come to them with an idea at this point, but it takes a while to sell them. My ideas are just a seed, so we need to take the idea further. We need to grind through it day after day, meeting after meeting, and develop it and make sure that it's going to work both logistically, that people are going to accept it. I mean, we're pretty fortunate because we're not really afraid of failure, which you can do on a small scale. We just go with what we're passionate about. We make sure that the numbers work. We just grind through it day after day after day, and that can be really difficult, but
This idea of not being afraid reminds me of something you told me about. You're not afraid to polarize an audience. And in fact, you said, look, some of the ideas, some of the aspects of our restaurants that are the most polarizing actually make them successful.
Yeah.
What did you mean by that, and what's a good example of that?
The sea of restaurants out there is immense, and it's what was the Hyatt term? The
sea of sameness.
Sea of sameness.
Sea of sameness.
You know, that's what we fight to swim out of, and the way that we do it, you know, our concepts are architecturally different, challenging. Oftentimes the noise levels can be challenging. The proximity of tables, everything about our restaurants makes them polarizing. And for us, we think if we can appeal to 0.1% of the people in this city, we're going to be successful. And I think people that love our restaurants really love our restaurants. People that don't like them, they shrug their shoulders. You know, it's too loud. It's too. I'm just not used to it. I don't understand it. You know, you mentioned the European idea. I mean, I think we incorporate a lot of influences from Europe. A lot of Americans aren't very used to them. I think as we become more of an international city, they become more acceptable. But yeah, we've always thought our success comes because we're polarizing, and it's okay. We're not afraid.
Yeah, Alison, one of the things that Levy struck me as having, where it has a real advantage, is that you have chefs all around the country. So on the one hand, I thought, oh, this is great. You have all these, you know, potential creative people, innovators, and then you bring them together at these events like the Super Bowl and other things, and you're throwing together leaders, people who are used to being in charge of their own operation, and getting them to collaborate. So how do you, and that is a potential source of conflict. Yeah. So talk a little bit about how you get the best ideas out of, you know, out of a group of people who could be competing or trying to vying for who's in charge.
Yeah, and that idea of that kind of entrepreneurial spirit, that real passion, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to do it, that's what you fuel while they're all in their own location. You know, take charge, do it, come up with a great idea. Some of our best ideas come from guys in the location, women in the location, and then you put them all together and you've taken these, you know, ping pong balls who will go anywhere and do anything and try to get the best thing going. And you tell them, okay, now go figure it out, go work together. And really important to that process is giving everybody their own slice of the pie. So if you're going to go to the US Open, Tony Mantuano, our chef at Spiaggia, is been involved in the US Open. We gave him his own piece. We said, go create a concept that isn't being done anywhere else, unique to the US Open, but you can go and you can own it. And then go be a ping pong ball within your kind of sphere of influence. Because you have to work with everybody else and everything else that's going on. So it's finding a way to take that wonderful creative spirit that you work so hard to cultivate and then giving it a little bit of a parameter around it and kind of making it work. I think we're lucky and fortunate that we have a company that has a culture of creativity and innovation, but also knows that we have to muscle through things at the same time. And that's a balance. When are we going to be the creative spirit? And when do we just got to muscle and knuckle down and just kind of get it done? So it's getting people motivated to be able to do both.
When you talk about creative spirit, I got to say, I'm thinking of the biramisu.
Oh, the biramisu.
That, when you told me that you guys created a biramisu, I was like, huh, how does that happen, and is that a good idea? Tell me about the biramisu.
I don't know, biramisu, does that sound good to anybody right now? Yeah.
We should have them. Sorry, we don't have them.
Yeah, we should have a little taste. That's not fair. That's an idea for next year, right? You don't get to talk about food unless you bring a sample. So no oysters, no pork, no beer, and no biramisu unless you guys get to eat it.
See, we're already planning the next Chicago Ideas Week. This is good.
That's what
on the way. Yeah.
Ideas do. So the idea was we had a kind of a bar space down at one of our restaurants in Disney and had gone through a reconcepting. And you know, one of the ideas was how do we get people to think about the bar and the restaurant a little bit more together, right? It's you know, making sure those spaces feel great. And so it was literally one of our chefs and one of the bartenders, and they, in the spirit of kind of working together, said, well, what kind of dessert would you eat at a bar? What kind of, you know, drink is gonna make you feel really good about being in that restaurant? Probably the latter, easier to answer, but they decided they were gonna create a dessert that was typical Italian, but not so typical, and it was the biramisu, and they used a local porter beer and used that to flavor and soak the cake and to kind of influence all the other flavors. And the best part was to make it kind of believable, you can't really serve that on a plate. So the best idea was to serve it in a lager glass. So a layered kind of dessert that brought, again, the minds of the guys that work behind the bar and the chef, and how do we combine two things and really go for the unexpected. Again, probably a little polarizing. You're purist when it comes to Italian food. Would probably not love that idea, but it's a little polarizing, and it gives people something to talk about. It gives you a chance to go out there and say you tried something new, or we're part of something that hasn't been done before, and that's what gets it going.
Yeah. Robin, I know one of the other projects you have going is this new school in New York, which, if I'm understanding this right, is really training people to build a career, launching from an entry-level job and thinking of an entry-level job kind of in a more expansive, long-term way. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, everyone's concerned about the economy and everybody's thinking about jobs, and it seemed to us at IBM that we needed to roll up our sleeves and do something about it, not talk about it, not complain about it. And so the idea, and this is some of the best ideas happen, our CEO happened to be at the US Open with then Chancellor of Schools, Joel Klein, and the next thing we had an assignment. Make this happen. We can do this. We can prepare young people for great IT jobs, and we can do it in a way that will be part of New York's economic development strategy. So the difference for IBM's role is that there are lots of companies that will write a check and say, we're going to adopt a school, or we're going to fund this program, we'll buy band uniforms, or we'll fix up the auditorium, or and those are great things. And any investment in education and our children, I'm for it. But what we're trying to do here is really shape the program. So we went back to IBM and we said, what are the real jobs that we hire for that open you up to a career? Not an entry-level dead-end job, not a minimum wage job, but a job that gets you into a career where you can raise a family. That's what we want to do. And now let's look at the skills and say, what do we expect someone to have? And work with the school system and work with the community colleges to say, we're going to put together a curriculum so that if someone finishes that, we know absolutely no question they are prepared for this job. Not a narrow job, but a large category of job that's going to allow them to learn, to grow, and to be in that career that's really going to invest. And the best thing about it, Chuck, is that when you and I spoke, we're starting in New York. Our school's 4 weeks old. And now, a 6-year program, you got to do it step by step, but our first month, we have 96.5% attendance, and we have the most amazing students and faculty. So we have one good month up on the board, and we're going to keep adding to it. But more important is that last week, we came to Chicago with Mayor Emanuel, and we announced that we're working with the city of Chicago, and there will soon be 5 such schools. IBM's going to raise our hand for one of them. We're looking for folks. We have some new partners here to work with us on another 4, so we're going to bring the model to Chicago and part of the local economic development plans here for the young people of Chicago.
Great. Nice. I'm going to ask one more question here, and then I want to open it up to questions from the audience. We have a couple of mics here down the aisles, so we'd love to hear what is on your guys' minds. Last question for you guys, and this is for anybody. We're always interested in not only success stories, but the lessons from the great ideas that flame out, that don't work, that are never, they don't reach the table, they don't reach the Lambeau Field or wherever. Who has a really good story about a constructive, a brilliant mistake, a constructive failure? Yes.
I have so many. How long you
Multiple
got?
jobs, startups. You're right. I mean, you've got
the quick one that comes to mind is a startup called Kid Capital, and it was out of what was happening with my kids and growing up with, I think, a lot of kids these days having more abundance than many of us grew up with. And so got the idea to start this idea to teach kids and their parents about responsible money management. And we launched in April of 2000.
Timing, there you go.
So timing is everything. And the lesson there was, at the time, and those of us that were involved in it, it was all about raising money and lots of investors and VC and all of that. And at the time, I knew how to be much more pragmatic about how to make a living, even if I wasn't pure to the grand concept. And I think in retrospect, what we should have done is just sort of bootstrap it a little more, not try to accelerate so fast, not go for all the big money. And I think for me, that's been a lesson throughout any innovation is, you have to stay pure to the big idea and the customer that it's serving, but be willing to be a little pragmatic to eventually get it to market. And it'll take some twists and turns, and just do what you need to keep the thing alive long enough to get it big enough.
Sometimes the failures, they may appear to be a failure, but
Yep.
it, to your timing conversation, it might be the done and dusted. Like, it's done and you just dust it off in a different version. So that idea of kind of getting wed to an innovative concept and being so passionate about it that you're so crushed when it doesn't happen, it really may come back. And in trying to inspire creativity in other people and throughout the company, it's being really gentle and encouraging as to finding the lesson in that failure such that you can bring it back and put it in the done and dusted pile. So, 3 years later, you can come back and say, see what we did? Or, with a little bit of massaging, you've got that idea that just maybe wasn't ready for the market or wasn't ready for prime time. Yeah.
Right. No, it comes back to timing, I think.
It does.
You're right. Hey, do we have any questions from the audience? Because we're going to shut down in a second. Yes, we have a mic down here if you want to come down for your question.
My name's Lee. I'm 23 years old, and basically, everybody else in my organization is more senior and has more experience than me. So my question to the panel is, how do you convince people with more seniority about your ideas, and if they're opposed to it, how do you persuade them, or how do you demonstrate that it's an awesome idea and change kind of the entire organizational culture around your idea? Thanks.
Okay, maybe the first part is realistic,
That's
but
all.
changing the whole culture, man, that is the big idea. But okay, who wants to tackle that?
I think a lot of people perceive innovation and ideation to be a threat, and it really is an opportunity. So when you can work with people to get them to look at it as the opportunity as opposed to the threat, that's really beneficial. So it may be your idea needs some benchmarking. Show them what's going on vis-a-vis your idea, so that they really can see it as an opportunity and not look at it as, oh, this is just something that we're just trying to muscle through and there's not a lot of validity to it. So it's taking that extra step sometimes to show the competitive landscape, show the benchmark, show a like idea from an industry unrelated to yours to really get them to open up. And sometimes that kind of gentler place for them to be more objective can be really, really effective. For us in our company, nobody really wanted to start an innovations team, and it took us 2.5, almost 3 years. So the other piece of advice is be tenacious, stick with it, and really keep that opportunity philosophy in your work. And I think that piece does pay off.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, be tenacious and do your homework.
Yeah.
That's a.
And
More
I think
succinct.
one other thing is that you need to engage people. So, help make it their idea. You have to explain to people how this is going to help you do something that you need to do, as opposed to this is an idea and it's kind of has nothing to do with what we're responsible for every day. You got to live within that pragmatism. So how is this idea going to help you do what we're trying to accomplish anyway? That I'm really on your team, and if you just think about this innovation, we're all going to be more successful.
Next question. Yes.
Hi,
over here.
my name's Emily, and I love the idea of getting out of the sea of sameness. My question about that would be how do you get out of the sea of sameness and be different while still being profitable? Because I think a lot of the times when you're trying to be different, you're trying to maybe fix things that are in place because they work. So how do you, or not because they work, because they don't work, but they make sense financially. So how do you get out of that and create new things and be innovative while still financially stay on the right track?
Yeah.
Sure.
I think particularly for big corporations, there needs to be a percentage, a piece of budget that's always investing in the future. I think sort of waiting till it's too late is too late. So, for instance, at Pfizer, when I was there, one of the things, and it took 3 years to get to this, was over time we actually allocated, a little bit like Google does this, I don't know if they still do, where 20% of your time you should always be focusing on new stuff. We didn't get to 20%, but about 5 to 10% of our time and budgets were actually invested in the new stuff. And so that was ample time and energy to manage the business profitably, and then we used those profits to actually invest in the new things. So I think there is a way to do it. You just have to keep innovating. Once you decide you're going to be innovators, you can't stop.
I would add to that, ask yourself how you got to the sea of sameness, right?
Yeah.
How did you get there? And sometimes some of your answers to that will focus on the efficiency side of it. And so while you're trying to do break state, you're coming across with some real viable and fundamental things that can initiate change quickly, right? And then you can kind of go for the bigger piece as you get there. So kind of what got you to that sea, and how do you get out of it?
Yeah, and I think to add to that, if you think about the core values of what you're trying to do in the restaurant, hotel business, service, for a restaurant, great food and great service, hospitality, and I think people lose track of their core values. I think the concept can be as innovative and creative as you want, as long as you work really hard to reinforce those core values. Our first restaurant, Blackbird, got criticized for tables are too close for a fine dining restaurant, too stark, too this, too that. And early on, people said the food was great, thank you. But we overcame that starkness, that noise level, with incredible service. We made sure everyone was smiling all the time at the door. People came in, they're like, wow, this is stark, it's foreign to me, I'm uncomfortable. And we relieved them of that fear, and we said, let us take you to your table, we're gonna make sure you have a great time. And just really overemphasizing those cores, I think, can allow you to be more creative and get out of the sea of sameness.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, and getting back to IBM being 100 years old, and you say, well, same old, but it's not, because you don't get to be 100 years old by doing the same thing. We constantly reinvent, and I think that anybody who thinks you can have the same product year after year, the same solution year after year, the world is about change. And the only successful companies are those, we were talking about this before, that as you're riding that wave to the top, you better be thinking about the next thing, because you don't want to be going down the other side. You want to have something new before you start sliding down. And I think that that's part of success, and that's part of longevity, is being able to change and being able to see the next new thing. Your core values always stay the same. The character has to stay the same. But your solutions and your offerings and your strategy and the way you're delivering it, a new restaurant, a new idea, has to change, because that's what the world's about.
Mm-hmm. Great. All right, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, you guys. That was great.
Good
You can go ahead and...
questions.